Part 1. You will hear a conversation between a travel agent and a customer. First, you have some time to read questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning. You've reached Lakeside Travel Agency. Martin speaking.
Hi, Martin. I'm hoping to book a short holiday and wanted some information about the city break packages you offer.
Of course. May I take your name?
Yes, it's Hannah Sandler.
Is your last name Sandlor?
No, it's Sandler.
Got it. So, are you thinking of traveling alone or with someone else?
With my sister, actually. We're both university students and hoping to take a 3-day trip sometime in early March.
Great. We've got several city break packages available. The most popular is a 3-night stay in Prague, including flights and hotel accommodation.
That sounds promising. How much does it cost?
For students, we offer a 15% discount, so the full package comes to £345 per person, all inclusive. That covers flights, transfers, breakfast, and a guided city tour.
Do we have to book specific dates?
You have some flexibility. The Prague trip runs every Friday through March, so you can choose between the 3rd, 10th, 17th, or 24th.
All right. Could you tell me a bit more about the hotel?
Sure. It's called the Riverside Grand, and it's right in the city center, just a 10-minute walk from Charles Bridge. All rooms have Wi-Fi, private bathrooms, and daily housekeeping.
That's great. Do they serve lunch or dinner?
Breakfast only, but there's a cafe just next door that offers good value meals.
And what about the tour you mentioned?
Yes, on your second day, there's a guided walking tour of the Old Town. It starts at 9:30 a.m. and lasts around 3.5 hours. You'll visit Prague Castle, the Jewish Quarter, and the famous astronomical clock.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to read questions 5 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 5 to 10.
Is the tour included in the price?
Absolutely. And there's a second optional activity on the final day, a boat cruise on the Vltava River. But that is for £18 extra.
That could be nice. Do we pay for that in advance?
You can, or on the day. But pre-booking guarantees a place.
Good to know. Now, what's the booking process like?
First, you'll need to fill out our online booking form, which includes your contact details, passport number, and any dietary requirements. Once that's done, you'll receive a confirmation email with your payment link.
Okay, and is full payment required right away?
Not necessarily. You can pay a £100 deposit per person now, and the balance at least 14 days before departure.
That's helpful. Will I need travel insurance?
We do recommend it. If you don't have your own, we offer a basic student policy for £12.5, covering delays, medical emergencies, and cancellations.
Perfect. And how do we get our tickets?
All documents are issued electronically. You'll get your flight e-tickets, hotel voucher, and itinerary in one email around a week before departure.
One last thing, my sister has a nut allergy. Can we request special meals?
Definitely. Just tick the relevant box on the booking form, and we'll notify the airline and hotel.
Excellent. How far is the airport from the hotel?
It's about 19 kilometers, and a transfer bus will take you directly from the arrivals hall to the hotel entrance in roughly 35 minutes.
That's really convenient.
Yes, and just so you know, there's an English-speaking local guide available on WhatsApp throughout your stay, in case you need help with directions or suggestions.
That's reassuring. My sister gets nervous in unfamiliar places.
Understandable. Is there anything else you'd like to know?
Yes, what should we bring?
Well, apart from clothing and toiletries, I suggest a universal travel adapter, since check sockets are different. And maybe a lightweight raincoat. March weather can be unpredictable.
All right, thank you, Martin. I'll speak with my sister and book online later today.
No problem. Let me know if you need anything else.
That is the end of part 1. You now have some time to check your answers. Now move to part 2. Part 2. You will hear a guide giving instructions to the visitors. First, you have some time to look at the map and read questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome everyone. My name is Kurt Stevenson. I am from the park admin team. I am glad that you are here today. Before we begin the tour, let me paint a map of the area you'll be exploring today. We'll start at the outer edge of the grounds. To the far west of the park, you'll find the river, known locally as the Olga. It gently curves along the border and creates a natural barrier between the complex and the dense woodland beyond. A narrow bridge stretches across it, built from timber and steel. That bridge is the only way across for people arriving by air. And speaking of that, just across the river, you'll spot a circular landing zone. Yes, that's the helipad. It's primarily used by special guests and occasionally in emergency situations. Medical evacuations are rare, but the facilities are in place just in case. Once you cross the bridge and move past the riverbank, the path forks. Take either side and you'll reach 2 identical lots, spacious, gravel-covered, and shaded by tall trees. These are the parking areas. They're situated just before the main entrance, one on the left and one on the right, providing convenient access for visitors who arrive by road. Now, after checking in at the ticketing office, many guests find themselves drifting toward the shaded walkways. On the left, it leads into a long, low building with large open windows and the sound of cutlery clinking. That would be the cafeteria. It's not always obvious from the outside, but inside you'll find fresh meals prepared daily and a surprisingly good coffee bar. If you keep walking past the cafe, you might hear faint animal sounds, chirps, rustles, and occasionally a monkey-like chatter. That's because tucked around the corner, near the edge of the trees, is the zoo. It's designed to blend in with the natural environment, so it's not visible straight away. But once you find the entrance, you'll walk into a quiet space with enclosures thoughtfully arranged among native plants. Now, if instead of turning toward the cafe from the ticketing office, you continued the right-hand pathway, you'd soon arrive at a structure that's hard to miss. Its curved glass facade reflects the trees and sky. This is the Arts Gallery. Unlike traditional museums, this one focuses on immersive exhibits and rotating installations. It's a space that rewards quiet time and observation. At the center of all these paths lies something quite different. You won't see walls or a roof. Instead, it's completely open. A circular area with scattered benches and often large temporary stages or sculptures being assembled. That's the open-air theater, used for performances, weekend events, and sometimes early morning yoga. It's not always obvious that it's a formal venue, but during peak season, it becomes the liveliest part of the whole complex. So again, to review briefly, you start at the river, cross the bridge, pass the helipad, and arrive at the parking areas. From there, whether you drift toward the cafeteria, wander into the zoo, explore the arts gallery, or relax in the open-air theater, the park opens up gradually around you. Make sure to mark these places on your map, and we'll begin our walk shortly.
Before you hear the rest of the speech, you have some time to read questions 16 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, just before we begin the walking tour, a little background on how the park came to be. Originally, this entire area was farmland, open fields bordered by the Olga River. The founders saw a potential to turn it into a community space that celebrated the arts while also preserving natural beauty. So rather than clearing everything, they kept the trees and water features and began building only what felt necessary. In its early years, the park didn't have all the attractions you see today. The lake was already there, of course, and a few open spaces, but the focus back then was on holding small concerts and film nights in the summer. They'd bring in portable equipment and screens, and local musicians would perform. It was a modest beginning, but people loved it. So why here, you might ask? Well, the team chose this site because it was unused land that had access to both water and roadways. There weren't any planning restrictions back then, and the area offered natural shade, gentle slopes, and room to grow. It wasn't about being close to the forest or part of a reserve. It was about starting somewhere with a blank canvas. In terms of future developments, we're currently planning a major upgrade to the zoo area. Over the next 2 years, we'll be adding more native species, redesigning some of the enclosures, and increasing accessibility with better paths and signage. There are no plans to add any new lakes or demolish existing venues. The theater, in particular, is staying, as it's still the heart of our seasonal events. Now, if you've signed up for the guided experience tour, you'll be taken around by a park educator. They'll tell stories about the animals, explain the artwork, and share details about the ecology, but we keep the format relaxed. After the main part of the tour, visitors have free time to explore on their own, with recommended walking loops for different interests. All right, we can have a 5 minutes break before we begin our walking tour of the park. Please make sure you're wearing comfortable shoes.
That is the end of part 2. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 3. Part 3. You will hear a conversation between two students, Emma and Raoul, discussing their project. First, you have some time to read questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
So, Rahul, how are you feeling about our social awareness project now that we've moved past the research phase?
Honestly, a bit relieved. The initial planning dragged more than I expected, but once we got into the fieldwork, it started to come together.
Yeah, same here. Though I do think those early group brainstorming sessions helped a lot. Remember that first one when we had no clue where to begin?
Definitely, I was all over the place with ideas. It was helpful just to hear what everyone else was considering. It forced me to narrow things down.
The visit to the Innovation Hub, though, I thought it would be more hands on, but we mostly sat through presentations.
I was hoping we'd actually interact with a few of the community project leaders. Still, the guest speaker they brought in, what was her name?
Dr. Lenton.
Yes. Her insights on urban inequality were solid gold. I filled 3 pages with notes.
Me too. It actually helped me reframe how I approached my survey questions later.
Did you use any of the online case studies from the university site?
I tried, but most were too out of date. I ended up ditching them in favor of more recent articles.
Good call. I also got a few tips from last year's students during the open Q&A session, but honestly, most of them couldn't remember much detail.
Yeah, I didn't find that session very useful.
So now that we're pulling together the final presentation, have you made any big changes?
Actually, yes, I'm restructuring the opening completely. I realized I was jumping into data too fast without setting the scene. Now I'm going to start with a story from one of the interviews, something more human.
That's a great idea. I'm doing something similar. I felt our process, the trial and error, the failed interviews, it was all part of the journey. I want to include that in the final version, even if it wasn't perfect.
Right? It makes the whole thing more real. Are you still using all 15 sources in your bibliography?
No way. I've trimmed it down to 10. Some of the early ones were just filler.
Same. I'm keeping the ones that actually contributed to the argument.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to read questions 25 to 30. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 25 to 30.
And what about your hypothesis? Still sticking with it?
More or less, I thought about simplifying it, but I think it's strong enough as it is.
That's fair. I just hope our presentation doesn't run over the time limit. We've got a lot to cover.
We'll manage. So, did you get a chance to look at the posters we have to analyze?
Yep, all 6. I started with Climb Without Ropes. It shows a silhouette climbing a huge wall with no safety gear. To me, it represented how some people have to succeed without any support systems.
That's how I read it too. But through the fog really hit me. It shows a person looking ahead, but the whole background is blurred, like their path is uncertain. I thought that stood for invisible barriers people face.
Oh, nice. I took that one to represent a lack of direction. But I like your take better. Voices Rise was next for me. A group of people all shouting different words, but the sound waves join into one large echo. I saw that as collective energy. How protest gains momentum when people unify.
Yeah, I got a rush looking at that one. Cracks in the Wall was quieter, more subtle, a gray brick wall with little green vines pushing through the cracks. To me, that was about growth from tough conditions.
That's beautiful. I interpreted Map of the Self as more about identity. It shows a face made out of pieces of city maps and personal objects. It felt like reclaiming who you are despite outside definitions.
Exactly. And then Now or Never, that one's hard to ignore. Flames at the edges of the poster, a ticking digital clock in the center. It's clearly a call to act before it's too late.
That one was intense. I think they saved the most urgent message for last.
Overall, analyzing these posters really added depth to the project for me. It helped me think more visually.
It's not just about words and data. Images speak in a different way, more direct, sometimes more powerful.
That is the end of part 3. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 4. Part 4. You will hear a speech about public libraries. First, you have some time to read questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I intend to shift your attention away from towering monuments and enthralling gadgets to something far quieter, but arguably just as powerful: the local public library. Whether it sits on a busy city square or a sleepy rural lane, the library serves as a social glue, a reservoir of knowledge and a refuge from noise. It does these jobs for toddlers learning their alphabet, for teenagers revising mathematics, for retirees mastering a new language, and for job hunters polishing their resumes. The coming minutes will trace how that modest institution began, how it survived wars and recessions, and why its enduring attraction is best described with a single word, namely universal. Let us start at the beginning. The famous Library of Alexandria was grand, but entry was restricted to scholars appointed by the ruling elite, and scrolls could not leave the premises. Real public service emerged only centuries later, when private book societies in Renaissance Italy began lending tiny collections to paying subscribers. Yet the decisive breakthrough waited until the 17th century, when records in Manchester mention the first town library funded through local taxes. That early experiment prospered because townsfolk felt genuine ownership of the shelves. Crucially, those early managers invented a system for tracking every volume as it moved from shelf to reader and back, calling the new ledger their book circulation. Skip forward to the industrial 19th century and you meet a steel magnate called Andrew Carnegie. He believed that wealth came with a moral obligation to elevate society, so he funded more than 2,000 public libraries on 3 continents. But bricks alone are not enough. Carnegie's grants required towns to keep doors open for at least 40 hours per week, hire trained staff, and, most radical of all, allow citizens of all classes to borrow material free of charge. This insistence on unfettered entry laid the groundwork for our modern doctrine that information is a right, not a luxury. Today, when librarians advocate budget protections, they point back to that original principle of equitable access. However, history shows that the ideal was anything but secure. During economic downturns, mayors saw libraries as soft targets for cuts. During conflict, invading armies looted or burned shelves. During epidemics, doors were locked for fear of contagion. The service seemed at those moments almost heartbreakingly fragile. Yet it survived because communities organised bake sales, drafted petitions, and volunteered endless hours to keep reading rooms tidy until municipal funds returned. Their determination demonstrated that a borrowed novel can feel as essential as bread when hope runs low. By the turn of the 20th century, librarians began seeing themselves as cultural curators rather than mere custodians of paper. Story hours, language clubs, and travelling trunks of books appeared in cramped basements and grand reading halls alike. One striking symbol of this expanded mission is the colourful mural that often covers the children's room wall, depicting explorers in hot air balloons or scientists peering through telescopes, signalling to every visitor that learning is an open-ended, joyful expedition waiting to unfold. All these initiatives would be meaningless, of course, if patrons lacked the skills to decode the printed page. That is why 20th century librarians championed nationwide drives teaching adults to read, focusing especially on factory workers and newly arrived immigrants. UNESCO data later revealed that in towns where the library doors stayed open after dark, school achievement rose and dropout rates fell. Economists might quibble about causation, yet most admit the correlation with improved household income is difficult to dismiss time and again. Local testimonies mention that a stranger with a battered library card found the courage to sit examinations, earn a credential, and secure stable work. Such stories testify to the centrality of literacy as the scaffold on which every other civic ambition rests. Beyond academic performance, researchers have begun exploring the psychological dimension of library use. A British longitudinal study followed pensioners for 10 years and concluded that those who visited a branch once a fortnight reported lower stress, sharper memory, and reduced feelings of social isolation. Librarians are not psychiatrists, but they do offer a quiet seat, a welcoming nod, and sometimes a referral to free counselling brochures. During the recent pandemic, many libraries set up telephone check-ins for elderly members, proving that a car catalogue can be repurposed into a lifeline when circumstances demand creative, compassionate thinking from ordinary citizens. Of course, the digital revolution has shifted the battleground yet again. Search engines promise answers in milliseconds, but those answers can be misleading or outright malicious. Modern libraries therefore run workshops on media evaluation, guiding teenagers to trace a statistic back to primary evidence before reposting it on social media. Participants learn to spot sponsored content, decode academic abstracts, and distinguish between empirically tested findings and colourful anecdotes. In other words, the library now issues not just books, but also intellectual seatbelts that prevent reckless driving on the information superhighway. Equipped with sharper thinking, citizens soon begin to create rather than merely consume. Many branches have converted an unused storage closet into a makerspace stocked with 3D printers, sewing machines, and microcontroller kits. Weekend workshops attract garage inventors who may one day patent a wheelchair attachment or a biodegradable coffee cup. This grassroots surge of innovation reveals an overlooked function of the library. It acts as an incubator where risk stays low because membership costs nothing. Tools are shared and mentors drift by at no charge. And when those inventors succeed, they often donate prototype equipment or volunteer as mentors, completing a virtuous cycle of skills flowing back into the community. So where does that leave us? If you map every service described this evening, story hour, archive, digital literacy class, maker lab, you notice a single thread. The library invests in futures rather than immediate applause. It reminds us that knowledge ripens slowly and that social bonds strengthen only when we listen before we speak. In short, the institution teaches patience. Ironically, such a lesson may be the most urgent in an era saturated with instant messages and next-day deliveries. If we nurture it, it will quietly continue nurturing us.
That is the end of part 4. You now have some time to check your answers.